episode of Australian Health Journal. I'm Dr. Anne-Marie Kazidlo. Our team here at the program has grown. Anne Deo has joined us as our reporter and Caitlin Poole as our new presenter whilst Helen is travelling in Europe. Caitlin, please tell us what's been happening in healthcare.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Leading the news this month is the new partnership between Fitbit and Google to send health data to doctors. Doing so creates the potential to monitor real-time health data and accessing healthcare records through Google's cloud for healthcare. Fitbit joins Apple Watch in developing healthcare opportunities for better monitoring of conditions and access to information. Apple Watch already monitors sleep apnea, heart pulse rates, and via a built-in electrocardiogram or EKG that's able to identify cardiovascular-related symptoms that could lead to stroke. How this agreement will impact Australians is yet to be seen, and we'll further investigate for a more comprehensive piece next month. We'll also include in the report recent news that the federal government is looking at blockchain to ensure medical research data remains protected. The recent Australian federal budget has shown how the government is looking to make the country a medical technology leader. Work in gene therapy and precision medical innovations through medical research have secured $1.3 billion in funding through the government's Medical Research Future Fund. Also in the budget, $154 million on lifestyle programs to help promote healthier living and increased activity. This also includes new online skills and health checkup programs for people aged 45 and 65. The education at these ages aim to educate on health problems that become more common once the individual has reached that age. Lastly, and with winter now here, the Australian government announced an increase of 26% on last year's flu vaccines. Australia's Chief Medical Officer Anthony Hobbs announced the increase in the number of vaccines available nationally would step ahead of the 10% demand being forecast. The National Immunisation Program has put pressure on supplies, leading to health authorities restricting supplies to GP clinics in an expected national shortage. The TGA has increased doses of vaccines by 1.3 million to this year be at 9.6 million doses distributed through the NIP, Australian state programs and other private outlets. The Australian Government is working with vaccine suppliers to retain stock levels, according to Australia's Chief Medical Officer Anthony Hobbs. However, concern is felt by GPs who could see patients not getting vaccinated due to uncertainty in when vaccines will be available. Back to you, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, Caitlin. In the show today, we caught up with Professor Simon Lewis from the Brain and Mind Centre at the University of Sydney on the Linked Clinical Trials project for Parkinson's disease research. This way of collaborating across a number of research institutes around the world is a great example and case for linking research across multiple centres for other diseases. But first, in today's episode, Anne has a report on emerging technologies in healthcare that were on display at the CEBIT show.
The CEBIT show was held in Sydney and over 3 days had over 250 companies showcasing their technology products and services. And of the companies I spoke to, a few have the potential to deliver new ways of caring for the consumer or patient and making an impact in the healthcare industry. Dr. Adrian, could you please tell us a little bit more about Concussionometer?
Well, Anne, I'm a sports doctor and I've been using the tools that for the last 20 or 30 years have been good enough, asking players how they feel after they've had an impact and testing their balance, their memory. What we learned was that's just not good enough. That's not an objective measure of what's going on in their brain. So we set out to find out how we could measure the brain's activity and look at that right at the sideline, and when they were rested after having an injury, when it's safe for them to come back. The concussionometer is the result. So the concept on here is that we actually stimulate the brain's electrical activity through the eyes. We all know the eyes are the window to the soul, but the fact is you can't avoid that when this helmet is placed on you, and the headset at the back has these electrodes which sit at the back of the skull. That's where the brain processes visual information. What we've learnt is that if we look at that information in somebody who's had a head impact and is suffering concussion, it's different from when they were uninjured, and as they get better, it comes back to normal. So this is an objective way of measuring what's going on the inside of your brain. It is in fact just like the ECG that we use for our heart, but it's for the brain. This is an issue that's on the front page of the paper as well as the back page of the paper. This is depriving players of a long career, and at the end of their days, it's meaning that they have chronic neurological conditions that could have been avoided if we'd actually recognised their concussions and protected them. So that's sport. But your brain doesn't care whether it's in the front row of a scrum or the front seat of a car. So motor vehicle accidents, falls, whether it's in the playground with kids or the elderly, and the military, unfortunately, is an area where just being in that percussive atmosphere all the time with weapons, with vehicles, and with IEDs means that a lot of veterans are coming back with blast-related concussion injuries. Now, just like sportsmen, it's always been thought we need to get them back into combat, back onto the field as quickly as possible, but that may not be safe. We now have a way of assessing when their brain function has returned to normal and we're safe to return them to exposure.
Thank you. And what about your medical trials? How are they coming along?
So it's important with any medical device that you have proper clinical information. So we have clinical trials in Australia and collaborations in New Zealand, the UK, and with the 8th largest hospital group in the US, Mount Sinai Hospital, to actually see as many of the players and the sports that are relevant. So we think about football, we think about horse riding, we think about wherever somebody might be exposed. And let's not forget boxing and mixed martial arts, where concussion is just a part of that actual sport. So we want to test people in lots of different areas and make sure that we're picking this up as quickly as we can and protecting the players. And place this over your head like that. And you'll see that on the inside. And here we see the lights that are flashing there. As this goes through its sequence, it takes only 30 seconds. And at the end of that time, we're able to see whether your brain activity is normal. For you, it's very individual. So there's no point just measuring everybody and pretending you're the same as a footballer or somebody who's an older person who's fallen over in the stairs at home. The test is finished now. Let's take it off and let's have a look at the result. So what we see here is what is a normal electrical response, and down the bottom is yours. So I have good news and bad news. The bad news is you're concussed. The good news is we've detected you're concussed, so you're going to sit out for the next week and we're going to look after you and put you through the rehab and bring you back when it's safe for you. That is good news.
My medical watch in fact provide a mobile app and smartwatches app, okay, which provide automatic detection of falls or epilepsy. So we've got an algorithm, in fact, in the watch, okay, which automatically detects a fall. So we've been working on this one for a few months, of course, okay. And what it does, in fact, if someone is falling, automatically detect a fall. And what it does automatically is notify all your caregivers. So caregiver can be your friends, your neighbors, okay, nurses, family mainly, okay. And the caregiver receive a notification automatically, and they will know exactly where the patient or their family is lying on the floor maybe, okay? And they've got as well GPS notifications. They know exactly where the watch is pretty much. And what it does, in fact, they can answer their phone, knowing, okay, I can help Serge, for example, who is on the floor. And all the other caregiver, okay, will receive notification as well. Okay, so that's a full notification system and escalations.
It dovetailed with a project that I'd been working on for quite some years, which hadn't really got off the ground. So it was a coalescence of ideas and resources. Yeah.
Right. So could you tell us a little bit more about some of the medical trials and how are they coming along?
So the medical trial, there are two medical trials. There's one for falls and one for the seizures. And the Falls app trial has been progressing now for over a year, and it's almost completed. The idea is to actually have robust data to prove that the app is sensitive, it's doing what it's supposed to do, and there are additional features in the app that will help the clinician in terms of diagnosis of the fall. So it'll record heart rate and that sort of thing that can help give an idea of what the status of the patient is when they've fallen, and also potentially what the cause of the fall is. We've got a number of controls, so we know what the movement artifact, so-called artifact is, and we've got a number of patients who've got falls of varying types. And the data are being collected, and hopefully we'll have the trial finished very soon.
One of the next steps as well will be to apply machine learning of all the data we can receive from the watch, okay? So not only, in fact, the falls, but activity during the day, okay? We are measuring, in fact, the heart rate as well. Okay, everything is going to be collected. And as you know, in fact, some smartwatches are coming with blood sugar as well. Okay, so all this data will be collected in our server. Machine learning will profile through a model, in fact, all the data will be particular for these users, okay? And that could be very, very helpful for like Professor Brew, okay, to analyze, in fact, all the data for these particular patients, okay? And to learn a bit more about why a person is falling, okay, what they've done before, okay?
Falls in hospitals are a big issue. And so I think if the app may need to be a little bit more finely tuned for that application, but that's a really big problem.
And our market, I will say, as you know, the population is aging and people want to live by themselves, keep their autonomy, but they need to be monitored. Okay, so our market is mainly, maybe not the patient, but in fact the family of the person, okay, because they want to make sure have a peace of mind and to make sure they know what their mother, father or grandfather are doing, okay, and they will be monitored. So that's our main market. Okay, so that's the notification coming in. All the carer are being notified. Okay, so as you can see now, I can say, for example, if I have a fall and I'm feeling okay, so I can do a press, I am okay, and I am okay. All caregivers will know that I had a fall, but in fact they all know that now I am okay. Okay, if you fall and you are unconscious, okay, of course you can't press any button.
We believe in looking after our aging population because aged care costs and healthcare costs is getting too high. It's not sustainable. So we try to, instead of building a vertical model, we go for a horizontal model. We use affordable technologies like fitness tracker from China, affordable Android tablet, affordable Google Home devices, and we put it together on our software platform. So we make the whole thing affordable. We believe looking after old people should save costs rather than make it more expensive. We are actually aiming for about 70 years old to 85 years old. Those people who can benefit from exercising, benefit from conscious awareness of their own personal health status. Because the more they look after themselves, the more they will be able to enjoy quality of life longer. And in long run, it will save them aged care costs and healthcare costs and benefit for the family and benefit for the economy as well.
So what do you foresee in the next decade for the healthcare industry for the elderly population?
Actually, we can already anticipate that. We are already in touch with primary healthcare network as well as hospital.
Right.
They are already considering helping us to move into medical grade. Our data is actually from the tablet, it go into the cloud. We intend to use Amazon Web Services in the beginning. And you can imagine that as soon as the data is in the cloud, it is available for the family. Most likely the daughter or the son who keep an eye on grandma to see it directly on the phone. And if they want to, they can authorize a community nurse or village nurse to look at the data remotely as well. So the key value is that the family can support and keep an eye on grandma remotely, cost effectively. And the nurse can support and keep an eye on more residents effectively.
Wow, that's amazing. So could we have a demonstration of Sana?
Yeah, sure. Medication reminder.
Hello ma'am, it is time for your medication.
Which one?
The pillbox marked Thursday 7 a.m. You should have 4 tablets inside.
Yes, I have taken them.
Nice. I have ticked it off for you.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to help.
Hey Sana, have I taken my medication?
Yes, you have taken your 7 a.m. medication. Your next medication is at noon.
Would you remind me again?
Certainly, I will remind you at your medication time.
Thank you.
Anytime, that's what I'm here for.
Great, so it sounds like Sana Health Intelligence creates a lot of great products such as this. Thank you very much, and also...
It's my pleasure to help.
Okay, bye Sana.
Bye Sana.
Thanks, Anne. Please keep us across any emerging technologies in healthcare for us. Next up are 2 bright innovators in cancer research. One is researching prostate cancer and the other multiple myeloma. We caught up with them after their presentations at a recent Cure Cancer symposium.
So I am an associate professor with Queensland University of Technology. My research is based at the Translational Research Institute, which is located in Brisbane, Australia. So my research is focused on prostate cancer, and I'm a geneticist by training. So my whole research is focused on looking at DNA variation which predispose men to prostate cancer. So what I presented today was more related to follow up on the genetic association studies, which was conducted in large sample set of where we analyzed 20,000 prostate cancer patients and control individuals and compare their DNA among each other and identified some changes which led to identification of variations which cause disease. And then we followed them up to identify how those changes were causing the disease, and that ultimately led us to identification of some novel genes and some novel pathways which are involved in prostate cancer. So I have been taking some innovative research at my cancer center, and this innovative research would not have been possible without the funding which is available through Cancer Australia. So I have been funded by NHMRC as well, which was funding my fellowship, which means that funding was supporting my own salary. But it didn't come up with any sort of consumable, and research in biological sciences is quite expensive and would have not obviously possible to reach to the level where I am with respect to my career as well as with respect to my research, which has led to identification of some of the absolutely novel outcome which were previously not known for the disease. So this funding has been really instrumental and detrimental for my career as well as my innovative research. Prostate cancer is the most common diagnosed cancer in Australia, and I have a family where I have 3 male in my family. I have got a lovely husband, a son and a dog who is also male. So if prostate cancer is the first diagnosed and most common diagnosed cancer in Australia, and I've been worried about my family, including the whole population, not just in Australia but worldwide, and that led to drive my passion of researching into prostate cancer area. And besides, like, because it's so common, I've come across so many of my neighbors suffering from the disease all these 10 years, especially when I have been in Australia. So at least 3 of my neighbors have suffered from the disease, and we lost one of them by this disease. Again, pushing me every day to go to work and try to look for the cause of the disease, which can then ultimately lead to the outcome with respect to better patient outcome and their increased survival outcome.
My name is Kyohei Nakamura. I'm a senior research officer at QIMR Berghofer Research Institute. I'm mainly studying cancer immunology, especially focused on blood cancer. Among blood cancer, I'm mainly investigating the immunopathology of multiple myeloma, a type of blood cancer. 3 years ago, I came from Japan, and in Japan, I'm mainly involved in clinical practice in hematology field. And since these 3 years, I have been involved in research field and studying multiple myeloma. And in 2018, I received Cure Cancer Australia grant and developed my small team in my laboratory, and I'm developing new anti-multiple myeloma therapy to improve patient outcome. Of course, this funding is, of course, financially it is really supportive, and I can do my own research by this funding. But importantly, this funding allow me to establish a small research team, and this funding, Cure Cancer Australia funding, provided me an opportunity to improve my leadership skills and team organization skill. So in terms of career development, Cure Cancer Australia funding has greatly supported me. Many people from overseas have joined in our laboratory, and in terms of international communication, we have international communication and collaborations. It's a really active environment. And of course, it's really easy for us to have new research to find new research network inside Australia. So it's really great, helpful environment for me.
World Parkinson's Day was marked with events across the globe. Here in Australia, the Shake It Up Foundation ran an awareness program with corporate support and media coverage that included Professor Simon Lewis from the Brain and Mind Centre, who heads up the Linked Clinical Trials Project for Parkinson's disease in Sydney. To set the scene, let's first hear from Clyde Campbell, the founder and CEO of Shake It Up Foundation. Clyde was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 44, and through Shake It Up helps to fund research with money raised being matched by the Michael J. Fox Foundation.
My name's Clyde Campbell, CEO for Shake It Up Foundation. We started the foundation back in 2009 after I was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 44. My day job is in all to do with robotics and industrial automation. When we first started the foundation, we wanted to ensure we were globally competitive. So we formed a partnership and a collaboration with the Michael J. Fox Foundation. This ensures we're globally competitive in the research we fund right here in Australia, but also doubles our dollar in research that we fund here. So if we're a $100,000 project, we'll fund $50,000 and Fox will fund $50,000, making us our opportunity to be able to get more research done right here in Australia.
I'm Professor Simon Lewis. I'm at the Brain and Mind Centre, University of Sydney, and I mainly focus in Parkinson's disease and other dementias. So it's very exciting. The Linked Clinical Trials Initiative really looks at trying to get together the brightest and the best, so the basic scientists and the clinicians, all sitting down and coming up with a list of what are the drugs or treatments that we think might be effective for treating Parkinson's disease. And really what they're aiming to do is to slow cell death, whether we're using new molecules or repurposing old drugs. The Linked Clinical Trials Initiative is a bit like being able to phone a friend 20 times. What we're talking about here is a group of individuals who sat down over the course of a few days and before that have gone through dossiers of drugs and said, look, this is the evidence supporting why we should trial this particular medication for this disease. And that's very, very important. It's a great sanity check. It also allows you to say, well, look, we're doing a trial in this drug, so please don't double up. Or if we are going to do it, let's do a very similar trial so we can at least share the data. And then finally what we get is the opportunity to say, look, if we can afford it, can we do some blood tests, look for biomarkers, something that might measure how active a disease is? Because I think it's very important for us when we do a drug trial to get more out of the trial than saying, did the drug work or did it fail? Because if we have some kind of biomarker, you might know, why did it fail? What's the better drug for us to try next time? And I think that's what we need to move into, is to doing smart research. So currently, our treatments for Parkinson's are symptom relief. Basically, everything we do with Parkinson's patients is to try and limit or alleviate the symptoms they have, and they're effective for a certain period of time. But as the disease progresses and more cells are dying in the brain, really the inevitability is that people get worse, either physically or non-physically, dementia, psychosis, all of these things that we see. So what we're really looking for is something that will stop or slow those cells from dying, and that's where our novel approaches really need to be focused. The biggest problem we see in the Parkinson's patients is the losing of dopamine, a chemical transmitter in the brain. So pretty much all of our symptomatic treatments are targeting that dopamine pathway, either replacing dopamine with the precursor levodopa or stimulating receptors that the dopamine would actually act upon, the dopamine agonists, or some approach that would allow more dopamine to hang around for longer in the brain, either a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, so breaking down the dopamine in the brain itself, or in the gut, so a catecholomethyltransferase inhibitor that would allow more of the levodopa drug to get to the brain. Deep brain stimulation really is for those people with more advanced Parkinson's disease where their tablets aren't working throughout the day consistently. So they suffer the lows, if you were, when their tablets don't work and they feel switched off and can't move. And they get the highs where there's too much involuntary movement. So deep brain stimulation essentially places electrodes deep in the brain and then passes a small electrical current into the tissue, which disrupts the signaling of the brain and really, if you like, replaces the job of the dopamine transmitter to give a more level control of symptoms throughout the day. Deep brain stimulation has actually been in clinical practice now for 25 years. Prior to deep brain stimulation, we were actually using a much more, if you like, unsophisticated technique where we would actually burn holes in the brain, damaging that cell irreparably. But with deep brain stimulation, what you get the chance to do is to put an electrode in there and then change exactly where the contact is and how much of a current you're going to put through there. So it offers us that flexibility, and it's obviously very safe because it's been in practice for so long. Deep brain stimulation in Parkinson's really targets two groups of patients: those who have uncontrolled tremor, that is to say the tablets don't help with the shakes. The other group who do well with deep brain stimulation are those patients who can't get a good level control of their dopamine during the day, and they have dips down and too much movement at times, these dyskinetic movements. It's fair to say if you select the right patient, those patients who do respond to dopamine tablets, the chances of success are pretty good. As a ballpark, a rule of thumb, what we generally say to those patients is, look, imagine yourself at about 80% of your best, and that's how you'll be for most of the time. And I think that's a reasonable rule of thumb. People often ask, well, will it last forever, doc? And the answer is yes and no. The disease will continue to progress. Deep brain stimulation is not a cure for Parkinson's disease. Again, it's one of our treatments that limits the symptoms that patients experience. But the cells are still dying, so things like balance are going to get worse, memory are going to get worse, and the stimulation doesn't help with those things as much as you would like. But in actual fact, patients who have had the surgery done, who've had a good benefit from it, if you say to them, well, look, you really don't think this is working, you turn it off, they will really very quickly realize that the deep brain stimulation is still working, it's just not doing everything they would like it to do. How do we start to find a cure when we don't actually know the cause? And there are a couple of ways of looking at that. One is to say, well, we do see some, if you like, relationships. So one of the common ones that people want to be aware of is that smoking seems to reduce your risk of getting Parkinson's. Now, this is not an advert to go out and start smoking because the risks of lung cancer are much higher. But there must be something about cigarette smoke that consistently comes through in all the trials. And similarly, we're seeing things now where we can look at the epidemiology of people taking drugs. So for example, people who've taken an inhaler for, say, their asthma versus a beta blocker for their blood pressure. Now, the clinicians will know that those drugs essentially work on the same receptor in different ways, on that beta adrenergic receptor. And interestingly, the people on the inhalers have a lower risk of getting Parkinson's, the people on the beta blockers have a higher risk, and that begs the question, well, why should that be? And the answer has to come down to the molecular biology. So we're getting clues, if you like, from the basic science. And that then allows us to say, well, can we target therapies? And they kind of break into two domains. One, is there a new killer molecule? A bit like the idea of in Parkinson's, trying to take out the abnormal protein that you think might be killing the cell. And that's a reasonable approach, but whether it's going to be successful waits to be proven. The idea of targeting that protein is something that people are looking at with that vaccination type approach. Maybe you can't accumulate it, or some way of, if you like, passively immunizing somebody so you can break up the protein and stop it going from cell to cell. And this is where big pharma is going to help us. This is a new molecule approach, billions of dollars in resource and time. The other, if you like, streamlined approach is to say, well, hang on, if we know something about drugs and we just talked about beta blockers and whether beta agonists might be better, maybe we should trial drugs that we already have in humans to see whether they might benefit through if you like, actions that the drug may have that we didn't really know about. So for example, one of the trials that's running here in Australia right now looks at the data and says, well, we have drugs that remove iron from the blood of patients with thalassemia. Interestingly, at post-mortem, if you look at the dying cells in the brain, those cells have got too much iron in them. So you say, well, hang on, why don't we take those drugs from thalassemia and give them to patients with Parkinson's disease and see if we can slow down the progression? And of course, if we manage to find a drug that was already in humans, it should be a quicker time before we actually go from trial to clinics. And that would hopefully speed up the whole process for everybody.
Thank you for watching another episode of Australian Health Journal. Please continue to tell others in healthcare or with a keen interest in health news about our show. Until next time, goodbye.